Hello, welcome to Cure Disease Kuri channel. My name is Junko Shiozawa and she is my daughter Kuri. Kuri has a very serious disease called DRPLA. It causes brain to atrophy. Inherited progressing disease. This channel's goal is to find a cure for many diseases, and I want to share Challenger's life. It's great goal. Today, I'd like to share research update from CureDRPLA. I'm a board member this organization. I've talked about CureDRPLA on this channel several times before. It's hard to believe that it's already been 5 years since it was founded. That feels so special. Dr. Sylvia Parados, our research manager, has written this report. This report is a bit different from the previous ones. Before, we mostly shared what CureDRPLA does and how far research has progressed. This time, we are talking about clinical trials too. For us, the families of patients, this is a big source of hope. Even Kuri is now part of a second clinical trials. Please watch until the end.
Thank you for joining us at the 2024 DRPLA Research Update. My name is Sylvia Pradas, and I am the DRPLA Research Manager at Ataxia UK and CureDRPLA. In today's talk, I'm going to be giving an introduction to CureDRPLA and DRPLA, and then I'm going to be showcasing a selected number of research activities that we do to raise awareness. And then I'm going to focus on the DRPLA natural history study and the patient registry. And lastly, I will be providing a much expected update on the N-of-1 clinical trials for DRPLA. CureDRPLA was incorporated in November 2019 after Paul and Andrea's son was diagnosed with dentatorubral pallidoluysian atrophy, or DRPLA for short, in 2018. When it was incorporated, CureDRPLA decided to partner with Ataxia UK, the leading charity in the United Kingdom that focuses on all types of ataxias, not just DRPLA, and they established this partnership because of the expertise from Ataxia UK in the field. The mission of CureDRPLA is to connect families, physicians, and scientists to further DRPLA research and work towards the treatment. For the purpose of this talk, it is very important to understand what causes DRPLA. DRPLA is caused by a genetic alteration in the atrophin-1 or ATN1 gene. And this gene has a particular section called CAG repeats that sometimes they become abnormally long, and this leads to toxicity in cells. So what we know is that everyone has 2 copies of this ATN1 gene from our progenitors, and in people that have been clinically diagnosed with DRPLA, in one of these copies of the ATN1 gene, they have an expanded CAG repeat section. So this means that these copies of CAG repeat get longer and longer, and the longer they become, the more they accumulate in cells, and it's this accumulation of the abnormal protein that causes toxicity. So what do we know about the DRPLA? So far, we know that it's heterogeneous. We don't fully understand the differences, or we don't fully understand what explains the differences in individuals, but we typically say that adult onset DRPLA happens when the first symptom is present after the 20 years And typically these people have less than 65 CAG repeats. And adult onset DRPLA is characterized by ataxia, involuntary movements, dementia, and behavioral changes. On the other hand, juvenile onset DRPLA, typically the first symptom happens before the 20 years of age, and they tend to have at least 65, if not more, CAG repeats. The characteristics of juvenile onset DRPLA are ataxia, myoclonus, seizures, and progressive intellectual decline. Everyone that knows about the DRPLA probably knows as well that there are no approved treatments that are specific for the DRPLA, and the clinical care focuses on managing symptoms. So, for example, people that have the DRPLA and present with epilepsy, they will be treated for the epilepsy, but there's nothing that treats or there's no specific treatment for the DRPLA. So now I'm going to be focusing on our outreach activities, and I'm going to start by celebrating or honoring a milestone that we reached last month. So as I was saying, CureDRPLA was incorporated in November 2019. So it's been 5 years since we started on this journey. And to honor this milestone, we decided to create this 5-year impact report. In this report, we are summarizing our achievements to date, and we also invited scientists and people with the DRPLA and their families to contribute and provide testimonials and quotes for the report. We are aiming to get 500 downloads. So if you if you haven't seen this impact report, you can find it on our website. So obviously, CureDRPLA is very active on social media. We try to do as much as possible. It's quite remarkable that our website had almost 7,000 visits last year. We are also very active on YouTube, social media. We monitor a close Facebook group for people with the DRPLA and their family members, and we launched a newsletter last year. Junko Shiozawa is our advisory board member, and she has a YouTube channel where she raises awareness of the DRPLA, and she has accumulated more than 1 million views on her channel. So there's different ways that you can help us raise awareness and support the work of our organization. The first one is you can join our newsletter. That's the best way to stay informed about our work and what's going on. You can check our 5-year impact report, follow us on Facebook, and do share these resources with your friends and family so more people know about the DRPLA. And for people with the DRPLA, their families and friends, remember that there's this close Facebook group that you can join. In October, we were in Boston because we hosted our annual research conference. This is something that we do once a year, and we invite scientists that are funded by us, healthcare professionals, and representatives of pharmaceutical companies, where we discuss the latest outcomes in the DRPLA research. And we also talk about what's next for us, how to keep moving forward, and more importantly, how to bring treatments to more people. Lastly, in November, we were in London because we attended the International Congress for Ataxia Research. And this year, it was the biggest conference to date with more than 600 people from 32 different countries. And it's quite remarkable, and this really shows the progress that we are making on the DRPLA, because for the first time there was a talk at the main stage on the DRPLA research and 7 posters highlighting the global efforts that are happening across the world. So now I'm going to move on and talk about the DRPLA natural history and biomarkers study. This study will help clinicians better understand the full range of symptoms and how this condition progresses over time. And it's also going to provide information that's crucial for future clinical trials. Natural history studies always happen before clinical trials. This study in particular is or consists of 3 study visits. So participants are having one study visit per year, and the study is enrolling people with DRPLA and people without. In terms of recruitment, this study is targeting or hoping to enroll 157 people, and they've actually recruited 86 to date. So they have achieved more than 50% of the recruitment goals. There's different types of study participants. So adult carriers would be people that have been diagnosed with the DRPLA and are over 16 years old. Adult controls are those that do not have the DRPLA. Pediatric carriers are people that have been diagnosed with the DRPLA and are 16 years old or younger. And pediatric controls are people in that same age range but that do not have the DRPLA. The clinicians doing this study are collecting a wide range of information. As I was saying earlier, the RPLA is quite heterogeneous. And with this study, we are hoping to understand as much as possible about this condition. So clinicians do collect a wide range of information, but do keep in mind that participants don't have to do everything. So if there's something that you don't feel comfortable doing, or for example, on the day of the study visit, you feel quite tired, you can have a conversation with your study doctor and decide how much or how little you can do. For example, clinicians are collecting information on demographics and clinical history. If the participant presents with epilepsy, they will ask about a bunch of questions about the type and the frequency of the seizures. They will also do a physical examination and functional test. They will do cognitive assessments, a brain scan or MRI, and they will collect a number of biosamples. It's quite important to understand that these type of studies, as I was saying, they always happen before clinical trials, and these studies encourage companies and researchers to work on drug development for the DRPLA. If you are interested in participating in this study and you haven't done so yet, there's different ways that you can explore this. If you are able to visit a study site, we have study sites in the UK, particularly in London and Cardiff. If you're based in the United States, there's one study site in North Carolina. However, if you don't live in these countries or you are not able to travel to one of these study sites, we have been able to set up collaborations with local clinicians and the study doctors at UCL. And for example, in this study, participants from Spain, South Korea, Brazil, Turkey, and so on have been able to enroll remotely. For more information, you can visit our website, and of course, you can contact us and we will help you better understand if it's possible for you to participate and what the steps would look like. So now I'm going to move on to the CureDRPLA Global Patient Registry. So this is an online collection of questionnaires that are going to help us better characterize the DRPLA, better understand the prevalence across the world. So that means how many people with the DRPLA live in each country. And it will help us connect the registry participants with opportunities to take part in other research studies like the natural history study and the N-of-1 trials that we will talk about later. This registry was approved by an ethics committee, so this means that a group of professionals looked at the way we collect this information and the way we store it, and ensure that we do this in an ethical way to protect your information. The registry is available in 6 different languages: English, French, Italian, Japanese, Korean, and Portuguese, and you can find all the information on our website. To date, there are 53 participants in this registry. 21 identify as male and 31 as female. The average age of our participants is 33, but you can see that our youngest participant is 7 and the eldest is 70. So we have a big range of people with the RPLA in the registry. In terms of countries, we have 18 people from Japan. That makes sense because the RPLA is more common in Japan. Then we have 11 people from the United States, 10 from the United Kingdom, and then two or one participants from all these countries. Of the 53 participants in our registry, 44 are symptomatic, so that means that they have symptoms that they can attribute to the RPLA. And 26 of them presented the first symptom before the 20 years of age, and those would be the juvenile onset participants, and 18 participants presented the first symptom after the 20 years of age, and those would be our adult onset group. There are 5 individuals that are asymptomatic, so they don't have any symptoms that they would attribute to the RPLA, and 4 that we don't know, and that's because sometimes participants don't ask or don't answer all questions. So this registry allows us to look at the progression of the RPLA within different groups. So for the juvenile onset group, the symptoms that they attribute to disease onset, so that would be the first things that they can relate to the RPLA for this group, are epileptic seizures and delayed developmental milestones. On the other hand, for the adult onset group, most of them attribute balance problems as the first sign of the RPLA. In terms of symptoms currently present in the juvenile onset group, they mostly reported balance problems, epileptic seizures, and coordination problems. Whereas for the adult onset group, they presented or they reported balance problems, coordination problems, and personality changes. So here we can see that there are some similarities between these two groups, but there are also differences. And that aligns with what's currently known about the RPLA. Something that also aligns with the literature is that the juvenile onset group present epilepsy more commonly than in the adult onset group. So next year, in 2025, we are planning to publish the data from the patient registry. This will be published in an aggregated way that will not identify individual participants. But now that there are 53 people in our registry, there's enough information for us to look at and to analyze it in a way that helps us characterize the RPLA in more detail. So if you haven't participated, now it's a good time to do so before we do this analysis, but the registry will remain open for the next few years. So the last section of my talk, I'm going to be talking about N-of-1 clinical trials. So what are patient-specific N-of-1 trials? These trials involve a single patient that received one therapy for a set period of time. In N-of-1 clinical trials, the clinical information and the biosamples are collected before and during the trial to determine if the therapy makes a difference. In here, I'm showing the difference between standard clinical trials and N-of-1 clinical trials. There are two things I want to emphasize from the difference between the two. The first one is the timeline. So For a standard clinical trial to take place, it takes years, at least 10, 15 years, since drug discovery starts, so since scientists start in the laboratory looking at potential therapies, until this therapy is approved for people to receive. So the first difference is that it takes several years. The second difference is that in standard clinical trials, assuming that the therapy being tested is safe and effective, the outcome of these trials will be drug approval and reimbursement. So that means that the regulatory agencies will approve this treatment if it's proven to be safe and effective. And then there will be conversations about how different countries are going to reimburse these drugs. So, for example, in the UK, that would be through the NHS. In the US, that would be through private insurance. Um, The second thing that's important to understand for N of 1 clinical trials, in this case, is to understand the mechanism of antisense oligonucleotides, or ASOs for short. ASOs are able to block or modify the process by which genes make proteins. So by blocking this process, they can turn down or correct the production of proteins that are involved in conditions like the RPLA that cause toxicity to cells. You might recall I was saying earlier that the DRPLA is caused by this expansion of CAG repeats. So this expansion causes the protein to accumulate in cells and cause toxicity. When ASOs are administered, they block the ability of genes to make a protein, and the result is that they reduce the abnormal ATN1 protein formation in cells, and therefore they can potentially rescue the symptoms associated with the RPLA. So, N of 1 clinical trials are possible for the RPLA because in the US there's a foundation called n-Lorem that charitably provides experimental ASOs to treat people with nano-rare conditions affecting less than 30 people in the US. You may recall when I showed the data from the patient registry that only 11 people have been enrolled or have participated in this registry. This is already a great proof of the usefulness of this registry. Again, the registry tells us that there are 11 people living in the US with the RPLA. This is not the full picture, but this is a way we have to prove how prevalent the RPLA is. So CureDRPLA started working with the n-Lorem Foundation and Dr. Jennifer Bain at Columbia University to explore N of 1 clinical trials for the RPLA in the US. In the US, there's a path that was established by the Food and Drug Administration. So that is the agency that regulates and approves medicines. And this agency developed a pathway for pharmaceutical companies and organizations like n-Lorem to develop new drugs for rare diseases that affect a very small number of individuals. This guidance that was established by the FDA is lacking in most countries, but it is true that some countries are now starting to explore a regulatory path for these trials. The first person with the RPLA to receive an ASO treatment is a 17-year-old boy of Korean heritage. He has 67 CAG repeats in the ATN1 gene. He started presenting with symptoms as early as 2 years old, and he had his first epileptic seizure when he was 9. Before starting on the trial, this person presented with ataxia. He was having approximately one seizure per month, intellectual decline, anxiety. He was having trouble speaking and being understood, and he was unable to walk for more than 50 feet without a mobility aid. And he also required full support for daily activities. So daily activities is things like getting dressed, going to the toilet, being able to feed yourself. The second person that started receiving this treatment had the first dose at the end of October, and n-Lorem has informed us that a third patient has been accepted for treatment in the US, but they have not started the trial yet. So, for the first person to receive this ASO, this person has received 5 doses in a period of 8 months. The ASO is delivered intrathecally, so that means that they deliver it through a lumbar puncture. It's very important to highlight that to date, there haven't been any adverse effects that can be related to the lumbar puncture or the ASO itself, and that is a really good outcome. Anecdotally, parents and teachers have seen a bunch of improvements. They have not seen any effect on the number of seizures. Perhaps the duration of the seizures is slightly shorter, but it's too early to tell. However, they have seen an improvement in motor skills, speech, and the ability to perform activities of daily living. So that includes this person is now a bit more independent. They are able to feed themselves. They are also able to put on socks, and that's something they hadn't been able to do for years. The trial is so the doctors running the trial, they are measuring different things. The first thing they are measuring is the ataxia, but they are also measuring seizure frequency, the duration of seizures, and they are hoping that over time, if this ASO is effective, perhaps they can reduce the amount of medication that the individuals take for their epilepsy. They might also see an improvement in intellectual disability, cognition, language, and communication. So this trial also has an extensive protocol because if there are any difference that can be attributed to the ASO, they want to be able to capture them. So the data and biosamples for the 6 months post-treatment are currently being analyzed, and while it's still early, the study doctors are seeing or are corroborating some of the things that the parents and the teachers have reported. The trial is not perfect yet. There are things that need to be improved. For example, the frequency and the concentration, the frequency of administrations and the concentration of ASO needs to be refined. So what the parents and the clinicians are seeing is that the days after the ASO is being administered, they see a big improvement in this person, but the days leading to the next dose, they are seeing a decline. So that means that perhaps the treatment should be administered more often or at a higher concentration so that the effects are sustained over time. Also, the treatment effects are variable. There are good days and not so good days, but now I'm going to show you a couple of videos that show the improvement in this person. So this video was taken, I believe, a month after starting the treatment. So you can see that the person, the boy, required assistance to walk. The second video was taken a few months later, and you can see that he was walking much better. So this treatment is definitely improving motor skills. So Other than n-Lorem, there are a few groups and organizations working on creating N-of-1 therapies. As I was saying, n-Lorem is US focused. There's a company called Everyone Medicines. That's a for-profit company that's developing personalized therapies. The N-of-1 Collaborative, that's a group that has an international focus. There's also in Europe the One Mutation, One Medicine group. The International Rare Disease Research Consortium is hoping to englobe all these initiatives to reduce duplication and create a roadmap towards development and implementation of N-of-1 therapies. And in the UK, there's a consortium called Rare Therapies Launchpad. This consortium is the most relevant initiative for UK-based families. It was created by Genomics England, the MHRA, which is the body that approves and regulates drugs in the UK, the Oxford Harrington Rare Disease Centre, Mila's Miracle Foundation, and the Association of British Pharmaceutical Industry. They launched this consortium in November 2023, and they are going to focus on ASOs in children with ultra-rare and life-threatening brain conditions. They are at an early stage, so they are working on how N-of-1 clinical trials can be run in the UK and how they can be funded. So moving beyond N-of-1, as I was saying earlier, I did emphasize two disadvantages of N-of-1 clinical trials. And one of them was that these trials do not lead to regulatory approval and commercialization. So with N-of-1 clinical trials, it's not possible, at least for now, it's not possible for regulatory agencies to approve this ASO treatment so more people can have it. And that's because N-of-1 clinical trials, to start N-of-1 clinical trials, you are doing you're doing less work or less tests before these ASOs are delivered to humans. So I mentioned earlier that for the standard clinical trials, it takes years before these therapies are delivered to humans. But for N-of-1 clinical trials, this process is quicker, and that's because they skip some of the steps that are required for a therapy to be delivered to hundreds of people. So what are we doing? We are exploring how to get more people in the US to receive this ASO. It's worth mentioning that with the N-of-1 route, it is unclear how many people will be able to receive this treatment. I was saying as well that the US has this regulatory path for N-of-1 clinical trials, but no other countries have specific guidelines. This is something that is going to change in the next few years, and we are actively exploring how to start N-of-1 clinical trials in the UK and other countries. We are also exploring if there are ways of commercializing this ASO and perhaps moving from N-of-1 clinical trials to standard clinical trials where hundreds of patients test this therapy. And again, if it proved to be safe and effective, it could lead to approval of this ASO for people with DRPLA. With that, I want to wrap up this talk. I want to thank everyone that has participated in supporting the work of our organization. It does take a village to do this type of work in rare diseases, and we are very thankful for all of you. Most importantly, I really want to thank all the people with the DRPLA and their families that have been supporting our work and have also participated in some of the projects that I mentioned here today.
There are still many challenges ahead, but let's stay hopeful until a treatment reaches every DRPLA patient. Let's keep moving forward together. So never give up. Tomorrow will be a good day. Thank you very much for watching.